In this section, we're going to look at how to calculate a percentage increase or decrease by using a multiplier. Before we do that, we're going to have a look at what it means to add on or take away a set percentage. So let's have a look at the first note here. Finding 3% of an amount and then adding it on is the same as finding what percentage of this amount. So if we take, for instance, the 100 square at the bottom here, and imagine this is 100%, there are 100 squares in this box, and we imagine finding 3% of that. 3% of that would look like this much here, approximately. Okay, so if I was to take that 3% and then add it on, what I would end up with is this extra part here. So if this original amount here is 100%, and I take this part here, which is the 3% of this 100%, and I add it on, what I now have is within this grid 103 boxes. So I have 103%. So it makes sense, if I take 100% as my starting point and add on 3% to it, then basically I'm going to have 103% of that amount. Again, here in the second example, finding 7% of an amount and then subtracting it is the same as finding what percentage of that amount. And again, down here we'll take this 100 square to be our 100%. If I was going to find 7% of that, 7% of this would look like these 7 boxes here, for instance, and I subtracted that, it would mean to remove that or take it away. So if I remove that 7%, what I'm left with is 93 boxes, or 93%. So that means that finding 7% of an amount and then subtracting it is the same as finding 93%. Again, it makes sense. If you start off imagining your beginning point as being 100% and you remove 7% from that, then you would be left with 93%. What this allows us to do is it allows us to increase or decrease an amount by a percentage very quickly. So taking a look at this first example where we're asked to increase £240 by 7%. Now, on the previous slide, we looked at increasing something by 7%. Bear in mind, I'm starting off with 100%, and I'm asked to increase it by 7%, so basically add on 7% to that, then that would leave me with 107%. So rather than working out 7% and then adding it on in 2 steps, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to find 107% of 240. Now to do that, I'm going to use a multiplier, which will simply be 107 divided by 100. So take that 107 there and divide it by 100. That's going to give me 1.07. And I can use that number to quickly find 107%. So back over to the question here. If I want to increase £240 by 7%, all I need to do is take my 240 and multiply it by 1.07, which is the multiplier to find 107%. Typing that into my calculator and I get £256.80. Just put the pound sign at the front there. And we'll continue on in the same vein with part B. So in part B, it asks us to decrease this time. So decrease 36 kilograms by 13%. Now, if we're going to decrease, imagine we started off with 100% and we're decreasing by 13%. So we're subtracting 13% away from that. That's going to leave us 87%. So rather than working out 13% and then subtracting it, what we can do is we can just find out what 87% is. Now the multiplier for 87% is simply 87 divided by 100, so 0.87. So if I want to take my 36 kilograms here and decrease it by 13%, I'm just going to find 87% of it, and to do it I'm going to multiply by 0.87. In other words, use my multiplier to find 87%. Again, typing that into my calculator, I end up with 31.32 kilograms. Same process we're going to use for part C here. Again, this time it's an increase of 3.5% to 250 grams. So again, I'm always go to 100% as your starting point. So I've got 100% to start off with. I'm wanting to increase by 3.5%. So we're going to add on 3.5% to that. And that's going to give me 100 plus 3.5, 103.5%. Now, the multiplier I use to find 103.5% is simply 103.5 divided by 100. So the multiplier here is 1.035, which is simply this number here divided by 100. So in other words, taking that decimal point there and moving it back 2 spaces is an easy way to think of that. We'll now go and apply that to part C. So we've got 250 grams as our starting point. We are going to increase it by 3.5%, so that means to multiply it by our multiplier of 1.035. And again, typing that into our calculator, we end up with 258.75, and this is in grams. We'll now go on to look at an example in context. So here we have Tom, who's paid £42,300 per year. His boss has given him a 4% pay rise, and the question's asking what will his salary be after the pay rise. So first thing here is we need to work out, are we doing an increase or a decrease? So a 4% pay rise, that's a percentage increase. We wish to increase his salary by 4%. So we're starting off with 100% of his salary, and we're adding on 4% to that. That's going to give us 104%. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for 104% of his old salary. So the multiplier for that will basically be 1.04. In other words, 104 divided by 100. So we're going to take the £42,300 that he's currently paid, multiply it by our multiplier of 1.04 to add on 4%. That comes to 43992 pounds, and this is his new salary with 4% added on.